Now, when I left the radio on yesterday, I was pointing out the time period that Daniel, the prophet, speaks about in Daniel chapter number 8. And I pointed out that at the end of the tribulation period, the tribulation obviously ends at the Battle of Armageddon. That will happen at the second advent of the Lord Jesus Christ. There will have to be some time between the Battle of Armageddon and the second advent and the actual beginning or the commencement of the millennial kingdom. And I have based that, I believe that for 10 years or more, though I am uncertain about the number of days. When Hezekiah reinstituted temple worship, there's a period of 16 days that I read about in 2 Chronicles. There is a number of years with Ezra in the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem under Ezra, and then Nehemiah, of course, rebuilding the walls. So, and again, these are things that we have to speculate about a bit. It is interesting. It makes for interesting Bible study and interesting thought. The first segment of days that we find in Daniel 8, 13, and 14, is a period of 2,300 days. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, 2,300 days, using a 365-day year, gives us 6 years and 3 months. 6 years and 3 months. Now, notice the way the text is written. Then I heard one saint speaking unto another saint, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? Now, if this 2,300 days is 6 years and 3 months from the time of the abomination of desolation, then we have the last 3 years of the tribulation period where the daily oblation is stopped, the temple worship is stopped. During that time period, we have the Battle of Armageddon, the second advent of the Lord Jesus Christ, and the liberating of the city of Jerusalem, Zechariah 14. Then we would have another 3 years. So it would be a total of 6 years and 3 months from the abomination of desolation. Now, the second time period, that number of days that Daniel speaks of, is in Daniel 12 and verse number 11. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Again, using a 365-day year, the 1,290 days would be 3 years and 5 months. 3 years and 5 months. Now, that would be the duration, in my estimation, plus or minus the duration of the last 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. The tribulation is going to be shortened, but we're never told by how much. Daniel's 70th week, which is a period of 7 years, are allotted for the tribulation period to run its course. And of course, the tribulation period will not run a full 7 years. So again, we're looking at 3 years and 5 months. Now there's a third time period that is dealt with in Daniel 12:12, and this is 1,335 days. 1,335 days. Daniel says, "Blessed is he that waiteth, and cometh to the 1,335 days." That would be 1,335 days, and using a 365-day year, that would be 3 years and 6.5 months. 3 years and 6.5 months. So we are looking at a time period of about 3 years plus or minus, 3 years to 3.5 years before the millennium begins. The tribulation saints will be raised after the second advent. We read in Revelation 20, and I'll deal with this later on in our study. And these lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. That would be the resurrection of the tribulation saints. I have never tried to put a time period on the time from the revelation, from the second advent, to the beginning of the millennial kingdom. I believe there's a time gap in there. I've heard some men say that there's a period of 40 years from the second advent until the beginning of the millennial kingdom, time period of 40 years, and they base that on the amount of time that it takes to gather up all the bones, the relics of war, the tanks and armored vehicles and other things that would be left after the battle of Armageddon. Now, I've never been able to make a distinction of that amount of time, a period of 40 years. That time period's identified. And I think very well that in the early days of the millennium, it could be well into 40 or 50 years, cleaning up the mess and the aftermath of the Great Tribulation period, the Battle of Armageddon, things of that nature. That it could be into 40 years, but I have some difficulty having a gap of time, a 40-year gap of time, between the end of the tribulation period and the beginning of the millennial kingdom. But a 3-year period of time between the end of the tribulation period and the beginning of the millennial kingdom becomes much more reasonable. For instance, what is going to happen during this time period from the second advent, the return of the Lord Jesus Christ to planet Earth, the Battle of Armageddon, the Lord coming to Mount Olivet, liberating the city of Jerusalem, liberating the captives in Jerusalem. What will transpire during this time? Well, among them will be the judgment of the nations. The judgment of the nations is going to have to take place. Matthew 24 and verse number 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Now, this is a reference to the second advent of the Lord Jesus Christ. We go on to Matthew 25:31. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all his holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. And before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was an hungry, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee and hungered, and fed thee, or thirsty, and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger, and took thee in, or naked, and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick, or in prison, and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was an hungry, and ye gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me not in. Naked, and ye clothed me not. Sick and in prison, and ye visited me not. Then shall they also answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee an hungry, or athirst, or a stranger, naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister unto thee? Then shall he answer them, saying, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye did it not to one of the least of these, ye did it not to me. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into life eternal. Now that's a very long passage that we've read from Matthew 25, but it deals with the matter of the judgment of the nations. The criteria for the nations to enter into the millennial kingdom. Now remember, at this point, while the Lord is sitting upon the throne of his glory, the sheep and the goats have not yet been divided. They are divided at the end of this judgment. And the goat nations, much like Achan and all of his band, they'll drop off into hell. I mean, they'll go to hell right there. The sheep nations will be allowed into the millennial kingdom, and they'll go into the millennial kingdom in natural bodies just like you and I now have. Again, I have much to say about that as we progress through the matter of the millennial kingdom. Before my time gets away from me on the program today, the criteria at the judgment of the nations for whether or not a nation is regarded as sheep nations or not is based upon their treatment of the people of Israel. How did they treat the people of Israel? What did they do for the people of Israel? How did they behave toward the children of Israel? I was hungry, and you fed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was in prison, and you visited me. All of these things are a criteria concerning whether or not a nation is regarded as a sheep nation or a goat nation. How did they treat God's earthly chosen people? What was their attitude toward the Jew, toward the nation of Israel? My time has gotten away from me on the program today. The Lord willing, I will continue in this line of thought on the broadcast tomorrow.
Correspondence may be sent to the Bright Spot Hour, Post Office Box 4, Greenville, South Carolina